For over 25 years, Trey Parker and Matt Stone have built careers on offense. But even South Park has boundaries, or at least places where the shock stops being funny and starts being genuinely disturbing. These aren't just controversial moments. These are the jokes that made audiences wonder if the creators had finally gone too far. Let's count down the 10 most disturbing moments in South Park history. The Jeffersons. In 2004, South Park introduced Mr. Jefferson, a wealthy man who moves to town with his son Blanket. The character was an obvious parody of Michael Jackson, complete with the signature vocalizations and a toy-filled mansion that attracts local children. But this wasn't playful satire. The episode went directly at Jackson's child molestation allegations, his dramatic physical transformation through plastic surgery, and his complicated relationship with race and wealth. The portrayal was uncomfortable even by South Park standards. Mr. Jefferson appears as a grotesque caricature, his face a mask of surgical excess, his behavior toward children deliberately ambiguous and unsettling. The episode walked a disturbing line between addressing legitimate public concerns and piling onto someone in genuine psychological crisis. What makes this episode particularly hard to watch now is how it's aged. Jackson died in 2009, and subsequent documentaries have shed more complex light on the allegations against him. Watching the episode today feels less like sharp satire and more like a public mockery of someone's mental health struggles and trauma. The South Park team has always defended their equal opportunity offense policy, but this episode feels mean-spirited rather than meaningful. The episode also tackled how the media and public treated Jackson as a wealthy black man, but these more thoughtful elements were overshadowed by the crude physical comedy and relentless humiliation. It's a rare example of South Park's satire feeling more cruel than clever, more exploitative than exposing. The creators were clearly trying to comment on Jackson's bizarre public persona, but the execution crossed from commentary into something that just felt sad and uncomfortable. Woodland Critter Christmas. Imagine sitting down to watch what appears to be a wholesome Christmas special. Cute woodland animals with rhyming names. A gentle narrator reading like a children's storybook. Stan Marsh helping forest creatures prepare for the birth of their savior. Then imagine that sweet story transforming into an absolutely depraved nightmare involving satanic worship, ritual sacrifice, graphic abortion procedures, and the birth of the Antichrist. That's Woodland Critter Christmas, and it remains one of the most genuinely disturbing episodes South Park ever produced. The twist comes when Stan discovers the cute critters aren't preparing for Jesus, but for Satan's spawn. What follows is a blood orgy scene directly inspired by the horror film Event Horizon, where the adorable creatures sacrifice one of their own and literally have an orgy in his blood. The episode doesn't stop there. When Stan tries to prevent the Antichrist's birth, the critters use demonic powers against him. The only solution involves taking baby mountain lions to an abortion clinic to learn the procedure, then performing it on Kyle, who's been possessed by the Antichrist. The episode ends with Kyle dying of AIDS 2 weeks later, revealed to be Cartman's twisted story told to his classroom. What makes this episode so disturbing is how it weaponizes childhood innocence. Every comforting trope from holiday specials gets corrupted. The animation style mimics classic Christmas cartoons while depicting genuinely horrific content. It's cognitive dissonance turned into 22 minutes of television. The episode was created in just 4 days, under extreme deadline pressure, and somehow that desperation resulted in one of the show's darkest creations. Trey Parker later said he roared like a lion when he realized they'd pulled it off. The Woodland Critters became so iconically disturbing that they returned in the Imagination Land trilogy. Fans consistently rank it as one of the best episodes while simultaneously admitting they find it deeply unsettling. That's the episode's twisted achievement. It's brilliant and nauseating in equal measure. Bloody Mary. South Park has mocked every major religion, but the Bloody Mary episode hit Catholics with something particularly graphic. The premise involves a statue of the Virgin Mary that starts bleeding, which Randy Marsh believes can cure his alcoholism. The disturbing part? The statue isn't bleeding from stigmata or tears. It's menstruating, and the episode shows it spraying blood directly into Pope Benedict's face. The timing made everything worse. Comedy Central aired the episode on December 7, 2005, the eve of the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, one of Catholicism's most sacred holy days. The Catholic League exploded with fury. Their president called it an appalling and disgusting portrayal. A Viacom board member who was Catholic personally intervened. The network pulled the episode from reruns and initially promised it would never air again. In New Zealand, the controversy reached absurd heights. When a local channel announced plans to broadcast the episode, Catholic bishops called for boycotts. 400 400 Catholics gathered outside the studio to pray the rosary and sing hymns. One advertiser pulled out. The channel aired it anyway and drew 6 times their normal South Park audience. The Broadcasting Standards Authority received over 100 complaints, but ultimately didn't uphold them. Buried beneath the blasphemy was actually a thoughtful message about alcoholism and Alcoholics Anonymous. The episode critiques the idea that addiction is a disease beyond personal control, arguing instead for self-discipline and taking responsibility. Randy's arc makes legitimate points about how AA's philosophy can enable helplessness rather than empowerment, but nobody could focus on that message because of the menstruating Madonna. The episode proved that South Park could make intelligent social commentary and still cross lines that made even Comedy Central nervous. After public outcry subsided, the network quietly returned it to rotation in August 2006. The whole saga demonstrated that certain religious imagery remains genuinely taboo. Even for a show built on taboo break, the episode asked how far is too far, then sprinted past the answer. Trapped in the Closet. When Stan Marsh takes a personality test at the Church of Scientology and scores as the reincarnation of founder L. Ron Hubbard, the organization declares him their new leader. What follows is South Park's most infamous takedown of a religious organization, featuring Tom Cruise literally locked in a closet refusing to come out. The episode's genius and audacity came from its simple presentation of Scientology's origin story, with the caption, "This is what Scientologists actually believe," appearing on screen. The show depicted Xenu, the galactic overlord who brought billions of aliens to Earth 75 million years ago and killed them with hydrogen bombs and volcanoes. Their traumatized spirits, called Thetans, now inhabit human bodies. South Park didn't exaggerate these beliefs, they just showed them. The Tom Cruise subplot provided the comedy wrapper, with the actor hiding in Stan's closet while other characters literally beg him to come out of the closet. R. Kelly also appears, and given his later criminal convictions, that hasn't aged well. But the real target was Scientology itself, its secretive practices, its expensive belief structure, and its aggressive response to criticism. The Church of Scientology mobilized against the episode. Tom Cruise allegedly pressured Viacom. Comedy Central almost pulled it under legal threat, but the creators held firm, and the episode aired to massive ratings and an Emmy nomination. The real consequence came from Isaac Hayes, South Park's longtime voice of Chef and a devoted Scientologist, who quit the show claiming it promoted bigotry and intolerance. The episode's cultural impact cannot be overstated. It introduced millions of viewers to Scientology's actual beliefs in a way that years of journalism hadn't achieved. By simply presenting the religion's cosmology without editorial comment beyond that one caption, Parker and Stone exposed something the organization had fought for decades to keep secret. The church's furious response only validated the episode's point about their controlling nature. This wasn't just controversial comedy, it was investigative satire that had real-world consequences, ending a 15-year professional relationship and making powerful enemies. The episode proved that some organizations are more dangerous to mock than others, and South Park had chosen to mock one of the most litigious groups in America. Cartman joins NAMBLA. Most controversial South Park episodes use shock value to discuss serious issues. Cartman joins. NAMBLA makes pedophilia itself the central joke for 22 minutes. Cartman, seeking more mature friends, logs into online chat rooms and accidentally joins the North American Man/Boy Love Association, a real organization that advocates for legalizing sexual relationships between adult men and young boys. The episode doesn't dance around what NAMBLA represents. Cartman meets various men from the organization who clearly intend to molest him, though he's too naive to understand. He becomes their poster boy, inviting all the boys in South Park to a banquet where the organization's members plan to prey on them. The chase sequence features naked adult men pursuing children through a hotel while set to madcap comedy music. Sky One in the United Kingdom banned the episode entirely due to its pedophilia content, yet it's considered a fan favorite and ranked number 7 on IGN's list of best South Park episodes. How does an episode about child predators become beloved? By ultimately taking a firm moral stance while using the subject matter to expose how such organizations operate and defend themselves. The episode's most crucial moment comes when a NAMBLA member tries to justify his attraction to children as something he can't control. Stan and Kyle shut him down immediately, pointing out that choosing to act on those feelings is what makes him a criminal. The show refuses to humanize or sympathize with the predators, making clear that some desires don't deserve tolerance or never understanding. There's also a parallel subplot about Kenny trying to force his mother to abort her pregnancy through increasingly violent means. His father accidentally ingests the abortion medication, leading to extended sequences of vomiting and defecation. When both plots collide, Kenny's father, Stuart, gets mistaken for a young boy by the NAMBLA members and is gang raped by dozens of men. The scene plays as slapstick comedy. The episode walks an impossibly thin line between condemning pedophilia and exploiting it for shock value. The fact that it uses a real organization's name makes it even more audacious. NAMBLA actually exists and has actually advocated for abolishing age of consent laws. By naming them directly and exposing their rhetoric, South Park performs a kind of public service. But wrapping that exposure in a comedy featuring children in danger tests the boundaries of taste in ways that make even longtime fans uncomfortable. With apologies to Jesse Jackson, the episode opens with Randy Marsh on Wheel of Fortune. The puzzle shows N_GGERS, and Randy needs to solve it. The answer is naggers, people who annoy you. Randy confidently shouts the racial slur instead on national television, stunning everyone. What follows is South Park's most direct confrontation with America's most painful word and its most controversial episode about race. The episode repeatedly uses the actual slur, though it was partially censored in broadcast. Stan becomes a social outcast because of his father's actions. Other white people keep approaching Randy for saying what they supposedly wish they could say. Michael Richards appears, the actor who played Kramer and who had recently unleashed a racist tirade at a comedy club. Mark Furman shows up, the detective from the O.J. Simpson trial who was exposed for using racial slurs. All real people who said this real word in real life. The episode's most powerful moment comes from Token, South Park's black character, who tells Stan that white people will never understand what that word means to black people. He explains that Stan wants to understand because it makes him feel better, but some things white people just can't grasp. It's one of South Park's most earnest moral lessons, delivered without irony or undercutting. Yet the episode's approach remains controversial. Some critics argue that repeating the slur, even in context of condemning it, normalizes its use. Others point out that educational discussions require naming the actual harm being discussed. The episode tries to have it both ways, using the word for shock value while also making serious points about racial pain and white guilt. The ending sees Randy forced to kiss Jesse Jackson's backside as penance, then joining a support group for people who've said slurs on television. He learns that apologizing doesn't erase the harm. Stan learns that some experiences remain fundamentally outside his ability to understand. These are mature conclusions for a show that also features repeated use of the most inflammatory word in American English. The episode represents South Park at its most ambitious and most problematic. It wants to educate about racism while also being deliberately offensive. It condemns the casual use of slurs while centering an entire episode around one. It tries to create empathy while exploiting controversy. Whether it succeeds depends largely on who's watching and what they're willing to forgive in service of the message. But there's no question it crossed lines that most television wouldn't approach. Scott Tenorman must die. This is the episode that transformed Eric Cartman from an annoying, bratty kid into a legitimate psychopath. It's consistently rated the best South Park episode ever made, holding a 9.6 rating on IMDb. It's also the episode where an 8-year-old orchestrates the murder of someone's parents, grinds them into chili, and feeds them to their son while making fun of him for crying. The setup seems almost innocent. High schooler Scott Tenorman tricks Cartman into buying his pubic hair for $16, convincing him it will help him reach puberty. When Cartman realizes he's been conned, he demands a refund. Scott refuses. What follows is an escalating series of revenge schemes where Scott outsmarts Cartman at every turn, publicly humiliating him repeatedly. The humiliation peaks when Scott makes Cartman dance and beg like a dog for his money back, then burns the $16 in front of him while Cartman watches. This moment breaks something fundamental in Cartman. He returns home, makes elaborate plans, and executes what may be the most evil revenge scheme in television comedy history. Cartman arranges for Farmer Denkins to shoot and kill Scott's parents when they trespass on his property. He then takes their bodies to chef and has them cooked into chili. At a chili cook-off, Cartman serves his chili to Scott. After Scott finishes eating, Cartman reveals the chili's secret ingredient, Scott's parents. Scott has just consumed his own mother and father, but Cartman isn't finished. He's also arranged for Scott's favorite band, Radiohead, to be at the cook-off. When Scott breaks down in tears at the horror of what he's eaten, Radiohead appears and mocks him for being such a crybaby. Cartman literally licks Scott's tears off his face, calling them the tears of unfathomable sadness, and declares this moment the happiest of his life. The episode marked several milestones for South Park. It was the first episode to follow a single plotline without subplots, proving the show could sustain a focused narrative. Trey Parker and Matt Stone extensively debated whether to go through with the parent murder, knowing it would fundamentally change Cartman's character. They ultimately decided yes, but with one condition: Cartman couldn't pull the trigger himself. Years later, the episode gained even darker context. In season 14's 201, it's revealed that Scott Tenorman's father was also Cartman's biological father. Cartman didn't just murder Scott's parents, he murdered his own dad and fed him to his half-brother. The episode transformed from shocking to genuinely tragic. What makes this episode so disturbing isn't just the content, but the execution. It's directed like a thriller, with Cartman's machinations unfolding with surgical precision. The writing is so tight that every seemingly random element pays off. The pacing builds real suspense, and the final revelation lands with genuine horror because the episode has earned it. This is a masterclass in dark comedy that goes to places no comedy about 8-year-olds should ever go. Even some South Park fans consider it too dark. YouTuber Phantom Strider included it in his worst episodes list, specifically because Cartman's revenge is disproportionate and cruel. But that's precisely why most fans love it. It established that in South Park's universe, there are real consequences, real evil, and real lines that once crossed cannot be uncrossed. Cartman became the show's villain from this point forward, and everyone learned to never, ever cross him. Episodes 200 and 201. These two episodes represent South Park's greatest creative achievement and its most significant defeat. They're banned from all streaming platforms, removed from Comedy Central reruns, and unavailable on South Park Studios' website. They sparked death threats, international incidents, and proved that even in America, certain images cannot be shown no matter how important the message. The premise celebrated South Park's 200th episode by bringing back celebrities the show had mocked over the years. Tom Cruise, Kanye West, Mel Gibson, and dozens of others file a class action lawsuit against the town. Cruise offers to drop the suit if South Park can deliver one thing: the Islamic prophet Muhammad. Why? Because Muhammad possesses a unique power. He can't be mocked. The celebrities want to steal this immunity. The brilliance of the concept is obvious. Parker and Stone were directly addressing Comedy Central's refusal to show images of Muhammad, a policy born from the Gillen's Post and controversy when Danish cartoons sparked global riots and death threats in 2005. South Park had previously shown Muhammad without incident in the 2001 episode Super Best Friends, where he appeared as part of a religious superhero team alongside Jesus, Buddha, and Moses. But by 2010, the rules had changed. Revolution Muslim, a radical Islamic group, posted explicit warnings on their website after 200 aired. They showed images of Theo van Gogh, the Dutch filmmaker who was murdered in 2004 by an Islamic extremist angry about his film depicting violence against women in Muslim societies. Van Gogh was shot 8 times, had his throat cut, and was stabbed with knives, one pinning a threatening letter to his body. The message to Parker and Stone was clear: make fun of Muhammad and you'll end up like Van Gogh. The threat specifically named both creators and mentioned that they had probably wound up the same way for airing these episodes. Comedy Central's response was unprecedented. They censored 201 far beyond what Parker and Stone submitted. Every mention of Muhammad's name was bleeped. The entire closing speech, where Kyle explains the episode's moral about fear and censorship, was completely bleeped, not because of profanity, because it discussed Muhammad. The bleeps were so extensive that the moral conclusion became unintelligible. Muhammad himself never actually appears in either episode except as a figure behind a black censored box. Even his silhouette was considered too dangerous to broadcast. Buddha snorts cocaine on screen in the same episode without censorship. Jesus appears without issue, but Muhammad couldn't be shown at all. Parker and Stone released a statement saying they couldn't stand behind the censored version. According to later reports, Trey Parker bought a plane ticket to South Africa and showed it to Comedy Central executives as a threat, mimicking Dave Chappelle's famous flight to Africa when his show became too stressful. Parker never actually left the country, but the gesture showed how betrayed the creators felt. The aftermath extended beyond just these 2 episodes. Comedy Central retroactively banned Super Best Friends, the 2001 episode where Muhammad had appeared without controversy. They also banned Cartoon Wars Part 1 and 2, the season 10 episodes that dealt with Family Guy threatening to show Muhammad. 5 episodes total were removed from circulation. When South Park moved to HBO Max, all 5 banned episodes were excluded from the streaming service. They're not on Netflix, iTunes, Hulu, Amazon Prime, or Paramount Plus. Digital copies that people had previously purchased became unavailable for streaming or download. The episodes exist, but in terms of public access, they've been memory hold. The DVD release of season 14 includes both episodes, but 201 appears in its censored form with an explanation card before it plays. The censorship remains permanent. On the commentary track for both episodes, Parker and Stone never say Muhammad's name, referring to him only as the prophet of the Muslim faith. The supreme irony is that these episodes were explicitly about censorship and fear. They argued that giving one group immunity from mockery gives them power over everyone else. They demonstrated the double standard where Jesus could be shown in pornographic situations, but Muhammad couldn't appear at all, and then Comedy Central censored them, proving their entire point while simultaneously silencing their argument. The episodes even predicted their own fate. Characters discuss how fear of retaliation makes certain topics off limits. They explain that backing down to threats empowers those making threats. Then real threats arrived and Comedy Central backed down. The satire became reality. What makes this most disturbing isn't the content of the episodes themselves, it's what they represent. The limits of free speech in America when violence is threatened. South Park had pushed every other boundary. They'd mocked every religion, every celebrity, every sacred cow, but when faced with credible death threats, the network that built its brand on edgy content surrendered completely. Parker and Stone had always maintained that the only way to be truly equal opportunity offenders was to mock everything equally. No special treatment, no protected groups. These episodes were the ultimate test of that philosophy. And that test ended with comprehensive censorship, permanent bans, and proof that in practice, some groups absolutely do have immunity from mockery, not because they deserve it, but because they're willing to kill for it. The episodes remain banned to this day. Revolution Muslim has since been shut down, its leaders imprisoned or deported. Theo Van Gogh remains dead, and South Park remains unable to show an image that appeared in children's history textbooks for centuries, but has become too dangerous for adult comedy in the 21st century. Crack Baby Athletic Association. Imagine watching babies in hospital withdrawal suffering from their mother's crack cocaine addiction. Now imagine those babies fighting each other for car keys while adults film them and sell the footage. That's the premise of an entire South Park episode, and it remains one of the most genuinely uncomfortable things the show has ever produced. Cartman's scheme is inspired by college athletics and NCAA exploitation. He realizes that crack-addicted babies in hospital wards will crawl desperately toward anything shiny, so he creates the Crack Baby Athletic Association, filming these infants in genuine medical distress as they claw over each other for keys. He sells the videos and keeps all the profits while the babies get nothing, just like the NCAA does with college athletes. The metaphor is obvious and actually insightful. The NCAA generates billions from student athletes who receive no compensation beyond scholarships. They're exploited for their labor while being told it's an honor. Cartman directly parallels this, arguing that he's giving these babies an opportunity they wouldn't otherwise have. The satire works intellectually, but emotionally, it's almost unwatchable. The episode shows actual hospital ward settings with babies in genuine distress. These aren't cartoon babies experiencing cartoon suffering. The animation depicts real medical situations where infants go through agonizing withdrawal from prenatal drug exposure, and the episode mines that suffering for comedy. Kyle initially reacts with appropriate horror, calling Cartman's plan disgusting and immoral, but when he sees how much money the videos generate, his principles waver. Soon, he's fully involved, rationalizing the exploitation with the same arguments real NCAA defenders use. It's a dark look at how profit corrupts moral clarity. The episode escalates with Cartman appearing in a scene directly parodying Django Unchained, where he dresses in Leonardo DiCaprio's costume and calls NCAA athletes slaves, offering to buy them. The scene is meant to highlight how modern athletic programs essentially own their players. But coming in an episode literally about selling videos of suffering infants, the slavery metaphor becomes deeply uncomfortable rather than cleverly provocative. Critics gave the episode mixed reviews. Some praised its willingness to tackle NCAA exploitation. Others felt the Crack Baby premise was so disturbing that it overshadowed any intelligent commentary. The episode tries to use extreme shock value to make viewers confront uncomfortable parallels, but many viewers simply couldn't get past the foundational horror. The episode also includes a bizarre subplot where the kids discover that Slash, the Guns N' Roses guitarist, isn't real. This random tangent does nothing to alleviate the darkness of watching babies suffer for profit. It just makes the whole episode feel tonally confused. confused. What pushes this episode so high on the disturbing list isn't that it tackles a serious issue. South Park has done that hundreds of times. It's that the vehicle for that commentary is genuinely suffering children in one of the most vulnerable states imaginable. Babies withdrawing from crack cocaine aren't a metaphor. They're real victims of real trauma. Using their suffering as the foundation for sports satire, no matter how valid the point, feels exploitative in a way that's hard to defend. The episode asks viewers to laugh at images of infant suffering while simultaneously recognizing the serious point about athletic exploitation. That's an almost impossible balance, and many argue the episode fails to achieve it. Instead of enlightening viewers about NCAA problems, it just disturbs them with images of babies in crisis. The means undermines the message. The return of Chef. Isaac Hayes voiced Chef for 9 years. He was there from the pilot. He provided South Park with warmth, adult wisdom, and countless memorable musical moments. Chef was beloved by fans and integral to the show's identity. When Hayes quit over the Scientology episode, Parker and Stone could have retired the character respectfully. Instead, they created the single most disturbing episode of South Park's entire run, not because of its content, but because of its cruelty toward a real person who'd been their friend. The episode begins with Chef returning to South Park after being away, but something's wrong. His voice sounds stilted and strange. That's because it is. Parker and Stone took old Isaac Hayes recordings from previous episodes and spliced them together to create new dialogue. They literally used a man's voice without permission to make him say things he never said. The plot reveals that Chef joined the Super Adventure Club, an organization of world travelers. But these aren't ordinary explorers. They're child molesters who travel the globe molesting children. The organization has brainwashed Chef into making sexual advances toward children. When Stan, Kyle, and Kenny hear their old friend asking to make love to them, they realize he's been corrupted beyond saving. The boys try an intervention. They gather the town and sing to Chef, reminding him of who he used to be. For a moment, it seems to work. Chef appears to break free from the brainwashing. Then a member of the Super Adventure Club arrives and immediately re-brainwashes him with a simple phrase. Chef attacks the boys, chasing them up a mountain. What follows is one of the most excessive death scenes in South Park history. Chef falls off a bridge onto rocks. He's impaled on a tree branch. He's shot. A mountain lion mauls him. Another mountain lion defecates on him. The episode shows his body torn apart in graphic detail. Then he's revealed to not be dead after all, just horribly burned and disfigured, only to be eaten alive by wild animals. But death isn't the end. Chef returns later as Darth Chef, a Darth Vader-style cyborg controlled by the Super Adventure Club. His signature greeting, "Hello there, children," is distorted into a demonic growl. The boys ultimately reject this corrupted version, declaring that the Chef they knew is dead. The episode ends with Stan explaining that Chef was corrupted by an evil organization that brainwashed him and turned him into something he wasn't. Everyone should remember Chef for who he really was, not what the organization made him. It's the most transparent metaphor possible. Hayes didn't really want to leave South Park. Scientology made him do it. This reading is supported by the fact that the episode never mentions Scientology by name. Just like Trapped in the Closet carefully avoided direct accusations while making its point crystal clear. The Super Adventure Club is explicitly about child molestation because Parker and Stone wanted to associate Scientology with the worst possible crime. They wanted to punish Hayes for leaving by destroying his character as violently as possible. Context makes it even worse. Hayes had suffered a stroke shortly before this episode aired in 2006. His departure may have been influenced by health issues and pressure from his church during a vulnerable time. He died in 2008. Parker and Stone used a stroke victim's voice recordings to have him advocate for child molestation, then killed him in the most gruesome way possible as revenge for leaving their show. Many critics who normally defend South Park called this episode too far. They described it as cheap, immature, and mean-spirited. Vernon Chapman, a writer on the show, later revealed that Trey Parker had purchased a plane ticket to South Africa and showed it to Comedy Central as a threat after they censored the Muhammad episodes, mimicking Chappelle's famous escape. The network apparently feared Parker was serious about leaving the show. That gives additional context to why they let this Chef episode air, despite how personal and vindictive it clearly was. The episode claims to be about how organizations corrupt good people, but in practice, it's character assassination disguised as satire. Hayes wasn't a public figure who'd attacked the show. He was a colleague who'd worked with Parker and Stone for nearly a decade before his religious beliefs created an irreconcilable conflict. His departure statement was measured, expressing that he couldn't be part of something that he felt mocked his faith. Parker and Stone's response was to portray him as a brainwashed pedophile, mutilate his body on screen, and splice his voice to make him say horrific things. They turned a professional disagreement into personal warfare, broadcasting that warfare to millions of viewers. They punished someone for leaving by making his most famous character as disgusting as possible. This isn't punching up at powerful institutions. This is punching a former friend for having different religious beliefs. It's South Park at its most vindictive, using its platform to settle personal scores rather than making broader cultural commentary. The episode proves that when Parker and Stone feel personally betrayed, they're willing to cross any line to inflict maximum damage. The truly disturbing part isn't the content, as graphic as it is. It's the real-world context. A man left a show because his faith made it impossible to continue. The show's creators responded by using his voice against his will, associating him with child abuse, and killing him as brutally as possible. That's not satire, that's revenge. And it's the most disturbing thing South Park has ever done because the victim wasn't a fictional character. It was a real person who'd helped build the show, then paid the price for leaving it. Trey Parker and Matt Stone have spent 28 seasons proving that nothing is off limits. They've mocked every religion, offended every demographic, and challenged every taboo. But these 10 moments reveal that even South Park's equal opportunity offense has limits, not because the creators won't go there, but because the consequences forced boundaries onto them. The Muhammad episodes remain banned, proving that free speech has limits when death threats arrive. The Chef episode demonstrated that personal revenge can corrupt satire. The Scott Tenorman episode established that Cartman crossed from annoying child to genuine psychopath. Each moment pushed further than the last, asking how far comedy can go before it stops being funny and becomes something else entirely. Some of these episodes aged into brilliant social commentary. Others feel cruel and exploitative. Whether crossing the line was brave or reckless depends entirely on perspective. What's undeniable is that these moments changed television, expanded boundaries, and sparked conversations that continue today. South Park's greatest achievement might be making us question where lines should exist at all. Their biggest failure might be proving that some lines exist whether we want them to or not. After more than 300 episodes, these 10 stand apart, not as the show's best or worst, but as its most genuinely disturbing moments when shock value crossed into something darker, more personal, and impossible to look away from.